Hey, welcome back to the Andrew Roman Show. Guys, happy 4th of July. I hope that you had a great weekend if you're listening to this episode right when it comes out. Hope you're having a good day so far, that your Monday is starting strong. Hey, I don't know if you heard this from last episode, but have you subscribed already to our YouTube channel? Our goal is to hit 200 subscribers. As of this recording, we're like at 177, so we're super close. Here's the goal. If each subscriber shares it to just one person, guess what happens? We double it. That's right. Easy math. Okay, I get that. That's not that complicated. But yes, that's our goal, to hit 200 subscribers. Don't forget to review us 5 stars in Apple Podcasts. Let us know what you think. And I sound so official, right? Let us know, like, if you're going to let the whole board of the Andrew Roman Show know. Anyways, let me know what you think about the show. It's always my pleasure to do this for you guys. Well, happy 4th of July. It is a day where we celebrate the independence of our country today, or really the day July 4th, which I guess is yesterday, is really a day to celebrate with our family and really just be thankful for the freedoms and blessings that we enjoy by living in this country. Now, honestly though, no day can escape the fires of social media. I was off the webs most of the weekend. Why? Because I wanted to just relax and not be bombarded by all the political activism that happens by my generation, especially on American holidays. As expected, July 4th brought its own heat, as it always does nowadays. And it's usually a day to celebrate this great nation. It's used, unfortunately, by people to make the exact opposite point. Either the U.S. is the worst country, or it's the best, or people are being accused of being a Christian nationalist. If you're a Christian, you celebrate July 4th, or worshiping America for celebrating July 4th. And then we're told that the true founding of America was not 1776. It was 1619, when the first slaves were sold in the United States. And that up to this point, our systems are just wrought with racism, resulting in the disparities that we see today. And between all the races, so there's some overt racism, but even more dangerous, covert structural racism, we're told. So instead of this, well, being a day to celebrate and unite as Americans, mainstream media and unfortunately our culture and the rest of the webs use this day to divide the country. It's interesting because we are told that the true founding of America is not freedom. In fact, it is bigotry, white supremacy, slavery, racism, and the ideas of some white old men. And that is in fact what makes the United States unique, that America is uniquely evil. Now, again, this is a very radical belief, but it is gaining ground. Not everyone thinks that, right? I'm not going to paint everyone with the same brush here. But it is gaining ground, that belief that somehow America is uniquely evil, or just this really oppressive place and bad place. In fact, I did a whole episode last year when there was a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests. Many of them were riots, that a lot of them just accused the U.S. of being structurally racist and systematically racist, and that the whole foundation of the United States is founded on white supremacy. And I did a whole episode in response to many myths regarding our founding, titled "Racism is Not in Our DNA," which in fact was a response to a comment that President Obama had made on the podcast, where he actually said racism is in our DNA, which again, it's very evident in him being elected twice as president and winning the popular vote twice as president. So yeah, so much for racism being in our DNA when you elect a black president twice in a row by popular vote. But anyways, instead today, I'm not necessarily going to do a reversion of my last podcast. Today, I'm going to approach the question, what makes the United States so unique? Why is it worth remembering 1776? Why is it worth celebrating this country? What should we do that? Should we not? What makes it so unique in this experiment in the Western world, so far so successful, but in danger, unfortunately, of a swift collapse? By examining 3 key dates in history. That's what we're going to do today. 3 key dates. We're going to get right to it. But before we do, let me not forget about this beautiful mug I have here sitting on my right. Now, this is probably the most unique and funny mug I have ever bought. I think you're going to like it. It's the Reno Prescription Coffee. So I got this in Reno, Nevada. Now you know everywhere I've been. Reno, Tahoe, Virginia City was the last couple of weeks. And it's really fun. I'll try to break this down as much as I can. So it is kind of like a prescription bottle, but it's prescription coffee. So it says this. It's kind of giving you instructions how to drink coffee. Okay, for all you coffee lovers, tell me if this is true. So it says this. Take one cup by mouth as needed to reduce fatigue, drowsiness, and irritability. Repeat until awake and alert. May be taken with cream and sugar. And I love this. It says the warnings. This is hilarious. If you can read this, I'll read it out loud. It gives you warnings like any prescription bottle. And it says it may cause a latte problems. Oh my gosh, the puns. Such as acute alertness, rapid speech, and frequent urination. Does not cure drunkenness. May make drunk people even more alert and entertaining. What are the approved coffee activities? Social media, actual socializing with other humans, breakfast, dessert, book reading, test cramming, late night studying, and making alert while sobering up. Caution may cause increased productivity. That is your prescription bottle to drink a coffee right there. So that's my mug right there. And I also have a book here that I'm going to recommend that I'm currently reading that gives me a lot of information. So we'll get to that in just 1 second. All right, we're going to look at 3 key dates to understand what makes America so unique. First of all, we are going to talk about 1619, the year. You've probably heard the 1619 Project. There's the whole podcast. It's a New York Times kind of project, and we're gonna Nicole Hill, Hannah Jones, I think is the lead figure in those writings. We are going to talk about 1619, and we're going to effectively dismiss the idea that America's uniqueness is in its sin of slavery. So we're going to do that. Second, we're going to learn more regarding the American Revolution of 1776 and comparing that with the French Revolution of 1789 and why that matters. Doing this will highlight principles which makes America a country to be grateful for and one to protect. All right, are you ready? Get ready, set, go. Here we go. To begin with 1619, we got a lot to talk about and not a lot of time. So here we go. 1619, the claim goes that one of its most defining things about America is that it is a racist country built on slavery, and that the oppression continues through structures of power institutions in America that are founded and kept by racism. It's very interesting. You listen to Ibram X. Kendi, which he's one of the lead authors of actually the book How to Be an Anti-Racist, and he's one of the lead proponents of anti-racism and all that train of thought and critical race theory and everything like that. It's interesting him defining even what racism is, which is a whole nother point. But he even says that racism are racist laws kept up by racist structures that equal racist inequities, which that's, first of all, if you're going to define a word, it's kind of hard to define the word with the word itself. The whole point is that is the claim. Thus, the real founding, we're told, of America was in 1619 when the first slaves were bought and sold on American soil. This is a defining moment in America. Again, this is where learning history is important. When you study history, you realize that slavery is not unique to America. Now, I'm going to take a quick pause before I say this, because people usually say, are you trying to excuse slavery? Of course not. It is a horrible, horrible sin that is part of virtually every country's history, and it is horrible that it was part of American history, and as we will see, we paid a big, big price to get rid of it. So definitely nothing to excuse. It is absolutely horrible. So let's go back. When you study history, you realize that slavery has been part of human history since practically the very beginning, but since the time of the Egyptians, at least historically speaking. In virtually every country practiced slavery to some extent, slaving enemy nations, and yes, even in Africa, it's not just the white countries, it's not just the colonials that did that. In fact, many African tribes and nations would enslave each other and then sell each other to European traders. So slavery is not what defines the U.S. You can actually read more about this from the author Thomas Sowell. If you haven't read him, he's a fantastic thinker and economist by trade, but also historian when it comes to intellects and racism. So, what is unique in America is not slavery itself, but is the great price we paid to end slavery. The most American lives ever lost in one war, the Civil War, which the primary reason to end it was that of slavery. If racism was ingrained in our nation, then we would be going against our DNA to stop racism in slavery. Yet, that is the very opposite message that the great abolitionist Frederick Douglass and President Lincoln gave. They actually urged America to live up to its true nature and defeat slavery. Again, if slavery was part of our DNA, was part of what our nation founding, then the message would be, guys, our nature sucks, go against our nature and build up a new set of values over here. But in fact, the message was not that. They urged America again to live up to its nature, to its Declaration of Independence and its Constitution. It is actually living up to our nature that why we ended slavery, passed historic civil rights legislation, and right now are the freest country for anyone in the world. That's right. There are more black millionaires in America than there are anywhere else in the world. If you are an immigrant, if you are a minority, there's no better place than America to be successful. Just ask immigrants that come. There's a reason that they come. Now, it's important to understand history is a combination of victories and defeats, of evil and of good. But to claim that 1619 is a defining point in American history and is what makes America unique is, first of all, historically naive, and second, it's politically motivated. So I want to encourage you, actually, if you want to learn more about the 1619 Project and more about American history and the myths that were taught many times, check out my episode named Racism is Not in Our DNA for more thorough response. So where does that leave us? Now we arrive at the Great Revolution of 1776. That's right, that's when our country was founded. Although it did begin in 1775, and by the time it ended, it was 1783. But the date is 1776, America. That's when everybody learned the word America right there. This is a revolution that was based on its ideological predecessor, the English Civil War. And this is why this is so key about understanding what makes America unique and not like any other country before its time or even right now. What made it unique is that the reason this revolution happened is it was based on a previous revolution called the English Civil War that I believe happened right around the 1600s or 1500s. I might have those dates wrong. But it was based on the great thinkers of John Locke and Edmund Burke. It was based on freedom of religion, man being above government, being the trial, having a trial before a jury, because before it was just a trial before one man or the king, and that was it. It was just one voice that could send you to jail. But there was this new idea of having a trial before a jury, and that the sacred and natural rights of the individual, which the government does not give, but only recognizes and is meant to protect. I want to say this is so unique to America, and based on the great thinkers of like John Locke and Edmund Burke, and of course based on Judeo-Christian values, is that idea of natural rights, that you as an individual and me as an individual have natural rights, which I will go ahead and explain a little bit later in this episode what that means. But the government itself actually doesn't give you those natural rights. Those natures of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or life, liberty, and property. The government doesn't give you that. The government just protects your right and it recognizes your right. So, because remember, what the government can give you, it can take away. So we see this in communist countries or totalitarian governments, where every right that a citizen has is dependent on the government. So the moment the government takes it away, congrats, you're nothing, you have zero rights, nothing to protect you. So that's so unique to the role of government in a free society like we live in right now. This whole revolution of 1776 was a cry of ordered freedom, not reckless freedom, but freedom from a tyrannical government in order stemming from personal responsibility. In fact, the great words of our Declaration of Independence, what are they? You probably know at least the beginning. That says this, quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the creators with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed." So this is what makes America great. This, if you notice the very top of that, where it says we hold these truths to be self-evident, not that they're evident by the government, or not that they're actualized by the government. No, they're self-evident that all men, and yes, they did mean in fact all men. Now, of course, there is a contradiction in that, right? Most of them are holding slaves at this point. So it was a struggle in American government. And again, I explain it in a very thorough way, the reasonings behind that and the thinking of the founding fathers when it came to slavery in my last episode. Racism is not in our DNA. So go with that. But this is in fact what makes America great. Understanding these principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are secured by the government, not given by the government. The government instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. People have kind of forgotten this now. The government has power because we give it. The government doesn't have power by itself. And the government is actually just a group of people. It's not like this. It's run by a machine now, like a machine, but it's not this arbitrary term. It's actually just a group of people that we give powers to. And unfortunately, some people love giving a little too much power to the government. So we'll talk about that in a second. So this is in fact what makes America unique. It is these great ideals of men being created equal before God that gave us the moral strength to end the atrocious sin of slavery. It is this moral strength that conquered the beaches of Normandy around the world and helped bring freedom in Europe and across the world. Of course, human nature has left its mark throughout all of American history and, well, throughout all of human history. Selfishness, pride, and corruption has all eroded this, unfortunately. But it was John Adams himself who wrote the part of the Constitution and was the founding father. He says this, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." And I say this again, John Adams was one of the authors of the Constitution and a major abolitionist. Again, if you don't know what abolitionist is one who wanted to abolish slavery. This is so important. He said the Constitution is only made for a moral and religious country. America still today stands as the freest country with the most opportunities for whoever is willing to work. Have you noticed that American is not an ethnicity? Now you can say, well, French is not necessarily, but for example, most of national soccer teams around the world, all the players kind of look similar, right? Todos mis mexicanos, pues ahí estamos, we're kind of brown. And you expect that, well, because they're all Mexicans. All the white Germans, or you have some black, some. But in general, you can kind of guess the color of certain teams. In America, though, just look at the American team. You have black, Asian, Latino, white, yet all are American. Today is a day to celebrate 4th of July. Again, whenever you're listening to this, if you're listening days later, well, it's not 4th of July, but 4th of July is a day to be grateful for the country we have. Not a perfect country, but one where hundreds of thousands of people have immigrated to for a reason. Unfortunately, America's foundations are weakening, and it has never been more evident than in the last 60 years. Remember what John Adams said, that it is for a moral and religious people? Well, we are decaying. Our society is decaying into a less moral and less religious people. In fact, this society is standing on everything built by hard work, by sacrifice, by faith, and by ingenuity in trying to revolutionize the whole system and start from scratch. I look at my society, my culture, or I would say my generation, and to be honest, man, a lot of my generation is just lost. They're lost in their identity. They're lost in who they are. They're lost in what they love. Everyone knows what they hate, but no one can truly find what they love and what they're passionate for, because I feel like we're falling and we're complaining even though we try to break the very floor we were standing on. Revolutionize the whole country. Start from scratch. You saw this a lot last year. Everyone was Instagram advocates and let's start from scratch and the government can be overthrown if it has stopped, pursuing its purpose and all this nonsense. What's important though to understand this, well, what we talked about 1619 and the importance of 1776. But there's another date which has impacted America and it continues to impact America and is very evident to this very day. That is 1789. Now, what happened in 1789? That is the date of the French Revolution. Okay. Why is the French Revolution important, you might ask? Je suis un français, je suis français, et je parle un peu français. I just became total French. You don't even, man, audio, could I convince you? Bonjour, monsieur, je suis américain, et je parle un peu français, et je veux manger un peu et croissant. I don't know what I said necessarily. If you speak French, I'm so sorry if I cussed or something accidentally, because I don't think I did. But anyways, why is the French Revolution important? Is because 1776, the American Revolution, set the foundation for building a prosperous and free country. 1789, on the other hand, set the tone for all of its ideological children, from Hitler's socialism to Russia's Marxism to Mao's communism in China, which all of those caused for the death of millions in the 20th century. And I say millions in the 20th century. Because we have to understand that the French Revolution's motto was Fraternité, Égalité, Liberté. Fraternity, equality, and liberty. Now, those sound good, right? I mean, what is the problem with that? The problem is that all those words derive their definition and were rooted from a humanist worldview based on human reason. The French Revolution's pride is that it freed itself from religion and finally was able to reason. In fact, that is the consequence of what we saw in the 20th century, was when countries freed themselves from all religious morality. And what do we see? The most death we've ever seen. In fact, Nietzsche in the 19th century predicted this, calling it the death of God, that would lead to an unimaginable amount of death. The moment that societies, quote unquote, killed God, meaning they got rid of God, it would cause the most deaths we had ever seen. And he was right. Here's the problem. The problem is, where do you get the definitions of this? You might be asking, Andrew, why are you talking about the French Revolution when we're talking about America? Because these ideas have now infiltrated American thought. So when it talks about fraternity, equality, and freedom, where do you get the definition of fraternity, equality, and freedom? Human reason? Who says who's a brother? Who says who's equal? Who says what freedom is? Hitler's Germany attempted to pursue fraternity and murdered 6 million Jews to purify their genes. The Russians and Chinese, they pursued equality to what? The death of millions. Why? And you can study this in the Bolshevik Revolution and how, unfortunately, in the name of equality, in the area of Ukraine, they killed most of the rich folk that were actually owners of farms, and they provided the food, but because they were rich, they murdered them. And the problem is that no one else knew how to farm except them. So because they murdered them, they caused a lack of food and actually a huge famine that caused the deaths of hundreds of thousands. Now, if you're like, Andrew, you're making up stuff, check your history. I'm not making this up. So who's deciding fraternity? Who's deciding equality? And well, liberty is the buzzword of every revolution, right? Yet all of these revolutions, the Chinese, the Russian, the Germans, it all ended in totalitarianism. These three principles of brotherhood, fraternity, equality, and freedom, they're good ideals when you answer one question. According to who? Again, who will decide who a brother is? What is equal and what is freedom? The government, the experts, or God? And the reason I'm talking about this is because the French Revolution's influence has affected even today's culture. You see, fraternity in today's culture has become racial. and ideological. Equality has morphed into equity, and liberty has become liberal. Fraternity has become, you're my brother if we're the same skin color. Blacks with blacks, whites with whites. In what was white supremacy 80 years ago and was the white racist, it is now anti-racism that has divided us, and critical race theory that has divided us from the privileged to the unprivileged, from the white to the black, and the POC to the white guilt, and all these terms that try to, in fact, divide us. See, fraternity by itself, based on the Bible, is good because we're all part of the human race. That is what makes us unique. There are not actually different races. We keep saying that wrong. I mean, it's fine because we're all saying it, sure, whatever. But in fact, it's not totally accurate. Different ethnicities, absolutely. But there's one human race. Society is set in making wealth, race, politics, privilege, every other group label that they can't find to be the defining factor of fraternity, the defining factor of brotherhood. Yet it shouldn't be. Acts 17, chapter 17, verse 26 says this, when Paul is talking to the people of Athens, again, not all believers, and he says this, talking about God, and he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on the face of the earth. From one blood. We are all brothers and sisters. Yet, unfortunately, anti-racism and critical race theory, if you see the pyramid that was exposed by Billy Johnson, by the way, check that out. Schools are teaching this in a anti-racism pyramid that even saying we're all one big family is in fact racist. No, it's not. That's actually the opposite of racist. Equality. Equality is found in this, in the Bible, when we learn that we are all made in the image of God. We have equality in value, not in ability. That's important to understand. No one has more value than someone else. No one is made in the image of God more than the others. Not one skin color, nothing like that. But we all have different abilities. In fact, there was the great Russian philosopher Alexander Solzhenitsyn who said human beings are born with different capacities. If they are free, they are not equal. If they are equal, they are not free. Not talking about value, but talking about capacities. See, equality of opportunity is the best gift God has ever given us, and it is exactly what we have here in America. We have an equality of opportunity. Equity is asking an equality of outcome, and that is disastrous because the only way that you can secure equal outcome is when you don't make men free. We all have an opportunity of what to do with today, so it's up to us. What about liberty? Liberty is a freedom secured by self-control. Or as the great thinker and father of conservatism once said, that if you don't put a limit on your appetite, if you don't put moral chains upon your appetite, it is not going to work. So today, it's time to be thankful for our country, regardless if it's July 4th or not. But it is a great date to remember this beautiful country. And it's also a great date to remember that it's only living according to God's principles. And ultimately knowing God himself when one can truly be free and live out the principles of fraternity, equality, and freedom because they're found in God, not in human reason. We'll see you in the next episode of The Andrew Roman Show. Amen.